Hi everyone, today I'll be going over this grade I did for a short film. This was the graduation short film for some of my colleagues from university. And I was both the colorist and the DP on set. So yeah, it was shot on Arri Alexa Mini. It was a pretty nice experience using that camera, and I think the results are quite nice. I must say this project was a bit of a challenge in post-production, although during filming as well. However, I think the end result is ultimately quite nice. Yeah, I'll be going over my process here and how I achieved the look that the director wanted. So yeah, let's jump straight into it. First off, here we can see an overview of the entire film. I'll make this smaller so we can see everything here. Basically, you can see there's different scenes. Some of them are marked in blue and the others in orange. So yeah, the film basically has two parts, two looks on it. One of them is the present day scenes, which are the ones in blue, which have a bit of a harsher, desaturated look, and the other ones are flashbacks. So these are a bit more dreamy, a bit more warm, and in general a bit more pleasing in terms of the color palette. The film is about a son and his relationship with his mother. This relationship is getting strained, it's difficult, and the present day scenes, they walk through how he reminisces of the nice moments he had with his mother. So the first thing I did was a bit of basic color correction, shot matching and balancing. So for that I used my node tree on the clip level, and mainly I used these 4 nodes here. In some scenes, for example this one, you can see these actually don't do anything. But in some others they do have some adjustments. For example, this one we have an exposure adjustment, just making this slightly brighter. This other one has a bit more, has exposure, a bit of contrast, and balance adjustments. So mainly I went through and tried to get everything in the same ballpark roughly. I'll turn off the look actually so you can see the images straight out of camera. I'll do this the same here. So these are 2 groups. As I said, it was shot on Arri Alexa. This is the image in Rec 709 with the clip level adjustment. So there's a bit of work here, but mainly it's just exposure, and obviously here some subject masking. In this case, we've got exposure and balance adjustments. So yeah, basic bit of correction, get the whites neutral, blacks fairly neutral as well. After I had all the shot matching and balancing done, after which I started building my look. So I did start with the Kodak 2383 LUT, and this is actually Cullen Kelly's LUT. So this LUT, unlike the DaVinci one, which has also a technical transform in it, this one is purely a 2383 Kodak LUT in DaVinci White Gamut. So here I just went from my working color space, which was Arri White Gamut 3 and Arri Lux C, to DaVinci White Gamut. Now this was a couple months ago. Right now I probably wouldn't use any tone mapping here, nor any of the other settings, but yeah, at the time I didn't really know that much about, the effect this has. So yeah, the LUT already, the 2383 Kodak LUT already gives quite a bit of punch to the image, and it's already in a nice place. However, I did want, and the director did want this to be sort of more dreamy, more warmish. So after that, I started sort of developing the look. In this case, I didn't use any contrast since the Kodak LUT already has plenty in it, as well as any of these I didn't use for this particular look. So remember, this is the flashback scenes. I'll later show the slight differences in the other one. Now we start with the look depth. So in this case, I believe I used, DCTL. So this is Cullen Kelly's as well, 3x10 matrix. And I just did some slight tweaking here in the different channels, in different colors. I'm still sort of learning about these details and all this stuff, but yeah, this got me sort of the result I was looking for, and it worked a bit better than using the curves here, the hue versus sat or hue versus loom or hue versus hue. custom curves in DaVinci. Since the flowers are an important part in the short film, I wanted to have them stand out a little bit. Now after this, these are some hue, saturation and luminance corrections. So it's a really slight change. You probably can't see much. Probably if you look at the scopes, you're gonna have a better view of what's actually happening. So this is off and this is on. You can see a very slight change. Some of the other scenes, it's a bit more noticeable, but mainly make this a bit more yellowish. So I added a bit more green here. If we look at the hue, actually, this is just moved ever so slightly towards green. Saturation, I desaturated magentas a bit, and luminance, yeah, the same, magenta. Now after that, I moved on to sort of cleaning up the image. So I used the custom curves luma versus saturation, where I want to desaturate the dark tones and blacks, as well as the highlights and sort of whites. I'm able to desaturate the highest values, both in the darkest values in the image, as well as the brightest ones. Now saturation versus saturation is a fairly similar thing, where I desaturate a bit more the already saturated parts of the image and saturate just slightly the sort of mid region of the image. After which I added density. So this is as well a DCTL. This is, I believe, actually it's Nurali Kushkov's DCTL. But I just wanted to use this because it doesn't have as many issues with sort of luma breaking and pixels breaking because of luma changes as in the RGB mixer. Wanted to play around with this one. So yeah, as you can see, just giving a bit really deeper and more heavy colors to the image. This one doesn't do anything. Now these adjustments, this is mist, so this basically blurs the highlights a little bit, and I did this as in the previous short film, just selecting the brightest region of the image and then just blurring them slightly. And again, glow, this one actually does something. I'm actually not sure why this one is here. I think this is really minimal in some of the in some of the scenes, but this one does give the dreaminess to the image. Lastly, this is all fine. Lastly, what I did here, the high texture thing, I just again selected the highest regions of the image, since a lot of these ones you try to compress them, they look very flat. So what I did is I selected the highlights. Yeah, so it's very minimal, but in some other scenes it does help a lot, and I just applied the texture pop here. So it helps a lot with giving those really sort of flat highlights a bit of texture and visual interest. Now, one of the major things I did that really helped me out, that was working really badly in the first version of the grade, I used a color space transform, which actually does nothing in terms of the color space. So it's just going from the same color space. What I did is use the luminance mapping option. And what this does is substantially limits the mapping. Now this is looking really badly because obviously we have a lot of things downstream of it. However, if I were to, for example, turn all of this off and try this again, I think. Yeah, so you can see the original image that we shot was very, it had a lot of dynamic range. So it had really bright highlights and also pretty dark parts, which on one hand was nice, but on the other, it probably didn't help, especially in the first grade I did. So what this does is brings everything down quite a bit, and it helped sort of compressing that dynamic range a bit. I'm not actually sure if this is the best way to do it, but I found out, I tried doing this way and it worked quite nicely. I also tried using the gamut limiter, I think, the OFX, but this one gave me the best results. And with this in place, the look and the grade looked really nice. So I was happy with that. Yeah, lastly, sort of grain, and this one is just selecting the shadows because they are a bit harder to add grain to. So these two, I'm just adding grain to the image. I'm not sure if you can really see that, but it does add a bit of a nice touch to it. Now, very basic vignette. This one is quite light, you can barely see it. You can see a bit in the scopes that cuts off a little bit of the edges, but again, really soft vignette. And lastly, the soft clip, which is mainly what I use to make sure my image doesn't sort of become illegal and get out of the range. So yeah, in this case, just sort of lifting the shadows a bit and compressing highlights. In this case, there's not many of them here, but in some of the images it helps a lot. Now, with this grade, which was fairly similar, main differences were I used a bit more of I used the HDR wheels here and sort of tackled some of that really high luminance parts of the image and brought them down. As well, I also used the normal wheels. In this case, I'm not really sure what. Oh yeah, just the offset. So in this particular image, bringing this whole look to be a bit more dark. Contrast, I did add a bit more contrast here. It was, I think, also partially what the director wanted. At some point, he did make a note that he would like this to be more contrasty. Yeah, saturation, so fairly desaturated as well. In this case, I used, just mainly desaturation here. I was playing around with color boost, saturation, but ultimately this one was the best one. So look development, this one has the detail on, but it's actually not selected. So in this grade, it's not doing anything. It's not doing the sort of hue shifts and luminance shifts in the yellows. Now these are fairly similar. If we go over them, you can see, so I did touch a bit more. I did reduce the cyans a bit and pull a bit of yellow and green towards red and warmer colors. In terms of saturation, desaturated quite a bit, and luminance also has a fair bit to it. So yeah, without them, there's still some yellows, some oranges, some warm tones from the lights, which are okay, but we were going for even a more gritty and desaturated look here. Now this is the same as in the last, in the other grade. So yeah, lume versus sat curves and saturation versus saturation curves here as well. Again, density here as well, and the same thing. This one, actually, this is texture pop, so it does help make everything a bit more sharp, more crisp, which helps with the look becoming, as we said, a bit more gritty. This one is just very slight increase here in mid detail. Now again, the LUT makes a lot of the grade here. However, without it, without sort of the corrections and adjustments, it just looks more similar to the flashback scenes rather than this own unique look. This is most of the grade. Obviously, there's a lot of tweaking. Some of these scenes, for example, were shot in really warm light. These were 800 watt RE lights, so these were extremely warm, so I had to bring that down. Then I had a lot of issues with sort of the skin saturation, the magenta, the colors. In the first grade, actually, some of the scenes just looked awful because their faces looked completely desaturated and white and pale. So there was definitely a lot of challenges here, but ultimately everything turned out fairly nice. Just wanted to show a couple more scenes that I liked. This one, I quite like the color palette. This is to the early log, but I really like the look of these images. In this one, you can see a bit more of what this is actually doing in these parts here. So just bringing them down, but adding a bit of texture back as well. And one of the last scenes that I really love, which is the final scene in the short film. This one as well, we used quite a bit of mist, and I think it really gives a unique and nice look on the scene. So yeah, that's about it. This might be a bit all over the place. I'll try to edit this and see how it looks and sounds, and maybe I'll just re-record it. But yeah, this is the grade I did for this short film. I'm happy with the end result. I've learned a lot of things during this film, during the grade of this film, as well as afterwards. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.